This actually presentation started out because I'm listening to you guys all the time. You guys don't realize how many notes I take. And I listen a lot to beliefs because beliefs can be really strong, beliefs can be very helpful, and beliefs can be very detrimental. And so I wanted to share today some facts about MS because of things I hear all the time. I hear them here and I hear them in my sessions with my clients. So today we're going to work and we're going to look at some facts. We'll probably be doing it actually a couple months because I've got quite a few facts to share. But today we're going to start with some of the facts about MS, what you might not know and why you probably should. Because some of the things I hear a lot of people and a lot of assumptions that are made about MS might not be doing you guys a lot of good. So fact number one, how bad is MS really? I want to ask you guys, how many of you guys have heard the phrase, this is a progressive disease, it's only going to get worse? I don't know how many times I have heard people with MS say this. Well, maybe this will help, but you know, Eva, this is a progressive disease. It's only going to get worse. This is constant. So let's find out. Is this true? There's a paper, there was a study done in 2016, which actually found that people with MS, the general society, general population, and even physicians actually view the disease as much more threatening, much more malignant, was their words, and much more rapidly debilitating than what medical evidence shows. Which means what everyone here and everyone in my sessions and everything you see online, the majority of people, including physicians, think MS is much worse than what it really is and what it's been shown in studies. So let's look at what studies that are studying 15,000 people with MS really see when it comes to how bad is MS. All right, facts about the disease. 20%, and these are both primary and relapsing-remitting, 20% of people with MS will become bedridden and institutionalized. Yes, 1 in 5 will have major issues with MS. 20% will need some form of assistance, a cane, a walker, wheelchair, scooters. 20% more will need some form of assistance in order to move around. But 30% will not require assistance or experience major disabilities. Yes, they'll have the eye, they'll have some fatigue, they'll have some elements, but they will not experience that disability, that needing of some sort of apparatus for assistance. And 30% will not progress at all. 40% are what all of us think are the majority of people with MS. It's a progressive disease, it's only going to get worse. But 60% are not going to fit in that poster child of MS. So let me continue. More data. This is coming from studies. I am a research nerd, and I spent the whole last year doing research, so I'm even more of a research nerd than I used to be. All right, because in all our research articles on MS, you have to say, MS is this, and MS is this, and this is, so all these percentages I've been looking at for quite a bit this past year. All right, types of multiple sclerosis. The two main categories, all of you are probably extremely aware of, is the relapsing-remitting and the primary, right? Then there's little caveats. There's people that have absolutely no scarring but have symptoms. There's people that have a lot of scarring but no symptoms. There's people that have primary but some fluctuation. There's a lot of little caveats, but the main two types are the relapsing-remitting and the primary progressive. 85% of people are relapsing-remitting. 15 are primary progressive. All right. There's actually studies that say they might actually be two different diseases because they act differently, they respond differently to treatment. And so there's differences that make them brothers, but perhaps different. Now, most of you here are remittent remission, right? And there's this fear, oh my gosh, in 10 years, it's only going to get worse. We've all heard this. The majority, I've looked online yesterday, Midline, WebMD, the MS Society, the majority of people will end up progressing. Let's look at the data. Of those that were initially diagnosed with relapsing and remittent MS, 50% will continue to only have relapsing and remitting. 50 other percent will progress eventually after 10 years. Is this a majority of people with relapsing remitting eventually have progression? It's kind of like, is the glass half full or the glass half empty, right? Now, there's some interesting caveats about it. Who gets that secondary progressive, right? There's that ticking bomb. Well, there was a research study, I think this research study of 2019, actually found that things that correlated with, well, who did get that secondary were if you were at an older age. You know, as Maria said, menopause starts contributing, old age starts contributing. If you're in an older age, there's more probability of getting secondary progressive. If you've had the disease for a longer period of time, for 25 years, there's more probability that might happen. If you have greater disability, then there's a probability that the possibility of you getting that secondary, that it doesn't, return as much. And if you've had a greater number of relapses in the previous year, that increases the probability. Interesting enough, what decreases the probability of getting into secondary is when your disability has actually gotten better in the last year. Then you're not moving towards that secondary. That was what they determined in this study. Mm-hmm. That if you had shown improvement, that was one of the factors that actually then, as they did the study and they continued, it was one of the probabilities that lowered your chances of secondary progressive. So, can we change this phrase? Should we change this phrase? Should we carefully not call MS a progressive disease? Because it's not for everyone. With primary progressive, 90% do progress. 10% actually don't. They stay stable and they never progress. John never progressed. If you guys remember John, he got to a point, never progressed. No waxing, no waning, it just affected his feet. 10% do not progress, even with primary. And with relapsing remittent, only 50% get that secondary progressive. So we need to watch how we assume things and what we assume, because this isn't accurate. And this, how can this affect us, having this belief?
Our attitude in general makes a big difference as to how healthy and well.
Exactly, attitude. I've had clients and I've read research in which people are suicidal after getting diagnosed. But they might not get to that bedridden. Remember, that's 20% of the entire, everyone, remittent remission and primary progressive. And they are considering suicide. It's like a lottery, right? They're considering suicide when their percentage might not be as big as they assume. All right, something I was watching you guys today when it comes to MRIs. How many of you, when you're about to get an MRI, are like so nervous? Oh my God, what is it going to show? Is it going to be worse? What if someone, Maria already has years of experience, so she's not there anymore, right? I think someone else was mentioning today about, or about the Ochrys. Oh, your MRI, it's showing lesions, not good. So we get this I have a lot of clients who the MRI is almost like a test, right? Interesting enough, I took out two very recent ones in 2019 and another paper in 2021, which actually showed that the activity in the MRI and the amount of disease burden in the MRI is not associated with getting secondary progression. This is a 2019 study. It's a longitudinal study, so it was like long-term study. What's on the MRI is not indicative if you're going to get secondary progressive. Okay, second, the outcomes of your MRI are not predicted. It is a weak correlation between disability and what's on your MRI. It is not useful in order to measure disability with secondary progressives. So breathe when you get those MRIs. Now, one more piece, which I think is fascinating. I was looking when I was doing the research last year, I was like, oh my gosh. And then I had to go look for this video and I only found it online. But let's see what he says, just the first few minutes.
The incredible video to your left is the result of a famous study from 2007 where an MRI scan was done every 2 weeks on a 38-year-old man with relapsing-remitting multiple sclerosis. And you can see all of the new lesions coming and going and shrinking down. And believe it or not, this man had absolutely no new symptoms and was completely stable for the entire year of the study. So,
can you imagine getting an MRI that year during when one of those bubbles are huge? That would scare the bejeebie out of you. Yes, or getting an MRI when the bubbles are calmed down. We need to be careful and just realize that physicians are going to do MRIs because it's one of the documents they have, and they can record and they can see how things are going. If there's some old, some old scarring, what's happening. All right. So MRIs are not the end all. They are not the test that determines your disability, nor determines if you're going to have secondary progressive. This made a huge wave in MS research. And then nothing happened with it. Why do you think it's bad to obsess and assume that MS is progressive? We kind of talked about this. MS is a progressive disease and you're only going to get worse. Who here has heard the word nocebo? It's the opposite of placebo. So placebo is believing something is going to be good for you. And that belief is about 31% effective. Drugs need to be higher than 31% in order to trump just your beliefs that this is going to help you. If they can't get to 30%, then, it's not good enough. You might as well just take a sugar pill. Nocebo is its opposite. Believing something is bad for you, believing MS is bad for you, will actually, and this is a study from 2012, will actually make your symptoms worse and produce new symptoms. That's why it's important to get your facts about MS. And when, something's going a little funky, stay curious. The body, remember, you saw that MRI, the body waxes and wanes and
Take care.
all right, we're almost done. So next, in our next presentation, we'll look at all the different theories currently about what causes MS. Because identifying the cause is what's going to help us be more effective in our treatments. And if we understand, and for me, I said identify it correctly, I'm going to tell you guys some of the theories behind it, and you probably have heard quite a few of them. And we're going to look at the research and the facts and look at the details, devil's in the details, so we can get a better assessment of what's really going on. All right. So I don't know if anyone has any comments or questions or.
I'd like to just say thank you.
Yeah.
This is the first group that I've attended. I saw it through the PEP magazine and so on, and this is wonderful. I am just recently diagnosed. I was young for a long time in my life and then was diagnosed and now realize I'm not so young and living into my new life, as I say. It's nice to have folks that I can share the journey with. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome, you
Yeah,
guys.
thank you very much. And I just want to
double on that, because, MRIs are just really dangerous, to pay too much attention to. And, I've had doctors say that, they've never seen somebody with more lesions in their brain than they saw on my MRI, but I don't have that many symptoms. Like they don't really give you any, I mean, we just don't know. So I guess, we don't have to be terrified when we see any MRI results. We want to just, as we all talk about, stay present with what's going on in our bodies and what can I do to help myself today.
Yeah, exactly.